So what's your story? We continue to remember that a story will be told about our lives, just as we tell stories about everybody's life. Today we tell the story about a man named Pius V, a pope in our church during the 16th century. A man who I would say was specifically prepared by God for a time in our church when we needed him the most. But he wouldn't have been prepared if he didn't start preparing himself at a young age for a task that he wouldn't know that he would be called to. Pius, as a young Italian boy, based his life on one of the promises of Jesus that said, "The gates of hell will never prevail against my church." Pius believed Jesus, and Pius wanted to be part of that promise, and he realized that in order to be part of that promise, he had to be faithful to Jesus Christ and his teachings, and to belong truly to the church's teachings. So Pius started doing that, not by trying to reform the entire world, but by trying to reform himself. He realized that it started with his own faithfulness, his own understanding of the church and its teachings. And he did that with great zeal. In fact, that's what he was known for. He was known for his decisiveness and his zeal. Well, let's be honest, that's exactly what the church needed in the 16th century. When there was corruption, when there was betrayal by the church's own priests, starting with Martin Luther, stepping away from the church's faithful teachings, when there was this Protestant Reformation that started up, and there was a lot of confusion about what was going on in the church and what was the true church, and how do we understand its teachings. Well, Pius, because of his zeal, because of his decisiveness, was unanimously elected to be our Pope. And at that time, he started a Reformation, and people believed him because of his authenticity. He set out to reform our church based on his true teachings, taking people back to the beginning, especially to the promise of Jesus Christ, and allowing us to trust in that promise once again. A few of the things that he did was that he started to reform the clergy by reforming their prayer. It always starts with our own personal relationship with Jesus Christ. He reformed the Roman Breviary, which is that little black book of Psalms that priests have now promised, like myself, have promised to pray 5 times a day. So we pray in union with the church 5 times a day for the church. He knew that priests needed to be praying for their people and for their church. He reformed and began this book called the Roman Missal, which is that big, large book that we use at every single Mass to help in our liturgies and our celebrations, to make sure that we were all praying the same thing and making sure that our liturgy was beautiful. He reformed the Catechism, that big green book that you have in your house right now, that teaches us what we believe, how to form our consciences based on the promises of Jesus Christ, and how to live it out in our own life. He reformed all of those things so that we could live a holier life, so that we could know exactly what we believe and how to follow Jesus faithfully. Well, this would all serve him. It would all be topped off by God's divine providence that would prove to Pius that all of his efforts were worth it. During that time, in 1571, the Ottoman Empire was the most powerful empire in the entire world. For 100 years, they had never lost a battle. It was made up by the Muslim Turks trying to ruin Christianity in Europe. And as they came across, Pius himself was forming his own battalion. And he formed a navy called the Holy League to confront the Ottoman Empire, knowing that if the Ottomans came into Europe, that Christianity may be ruined. Well, although the Christians were vastly outnumbered during that battle, by the divine power of God, the promise that the gates of hell would never prevail against his church, the Christians were victorious, especially through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The Lord rewarded Pius for his faithfulness, for his continued reformation of himself, and for his zeal. In fact, a fun fact about Pius, the very reason that popes today wear that white cassock is because of Pius V, who was a Dominican. And because he was a Dominican, he always wore a white habit. And he continued to wear that during his papacy. And so as he wore that white habit, popes ever since have kept that tradition of wearing that white cassock. As we look at our lives today, we recognize that the Lord is preparing us for something serious in the church. He needs people who are zealous, who are decisive, who are clear about what the church teaches and have the ability to teach others. Right now, if we have time on our hands, and maybe we should just make time for this, pull out that green catechism that Pius helped to produce. Pull out that catechism so we can know the church's teachings, so that we can make sure that we aren't the ones who are corrupt, the ones who are unfaithful, the ones who are causing confusion in the church and leading other people astray. Our church right now needs those same things It needs clarity. It needs zealous Christians. And that's the way that God's promises work, that the gates of hell will never prevail. But if they're not to prevail, they're not to prevail against those who are faithful to the Lord's teachings. Today we remember that the Lord is preparing us. Today we say yes, and we just never stop.